and 33 reviewed. The lottery transporter, we have one approval with one more remaining. And the lottery hybrid, we have one approval, one remaining. And the lottery product packager, two approvals, one remaining. Product manufacturer, two, and one remaining. So there's a total of three in that category. So that's just the kind of the high level of where we are with the applications reviewed for social equity. And we anticipate that in October could be the final votes on the social equity applications. Under marketing and outreach, we are working with Camelo Communications on an outreach and branding strategy, which is in draft, and also working with them on the website redesign. We realize our website is a little hard to manage, but we were given that website and we are working on making it user-friendly. For the accelerator program, the contract with Oaksterdam University, it has been drafted. It is in review by both social equity and the university provider. We've established weekly program meetings, and we hope to have our first programs and a rollout of the program sometime in November. For the low interest cannabis business loan program, that program is in its final draft. I am requesting today of the council to approve an ad hoc committee to review and finalize the program details so that the council has full understanding of how the program will work. This is a joint program between the council and the Department of Economic and Community Development. I have spoken with member Avery Gaddis, and he has offered to chair this ad hoc committee. So I am asking the council to please vote to create this committee, and we will finalize this program. And I'd like to present it at the October meeting if everything goes well. For workforce development plan review, those reviews are underway. We have established weekly meetings with Cone Resnick to review the workforce development plans and any questions that they may have on their process and things that may need clarification. We do anticipate our first vote of workforce development plans at a special meeting of the council scheduled right now tentatively for September 22nd. As far as the Social Equity Council's Biennium 2024 budget, we have drafted a budget. That budget has been circulated to the chairs of our committees and will be presented to the Finance Committee at a meeting on September 16th. Once the Finance Committee has had an opportunity to review the budget and comment on it, we expect to have that budget made available to the full council and a vote on it during the special meeting, again, that is tentatively scheduled for September 22nd. As far as the DIA annual recertification, the policy committee will be reviewing some additional compiled data at its meeting this month, and we hope to have a recommendation for the council at its October meeting if all goes well as far as reviewing the data and the policy committee feels comfortable making the recommendation for recertifying of the map at the meeting in October. And finally, I have the next meeting dates for each of the committees. The Finance Committee, again, is scheduled to meet on September 16th at 10:30 a.m. The Outreach Committee is scheduled to meet September 9th at 10 a.m. The Workforce Development Committee is scheduled to meet October 19th at 2 p.m. The Policy Committee is scheduled to meet September 15th at 10 a.m. The Governance Committee, October 26th at 1 p.m. The next meeting of the full council will be a special meeting, again, tentatively scheduled for September 22nd at 10 a.m. And then the next full council regularly scheduled meeting will be in October 6th, 10 a.m. And I just want everyone to note that that is not a Tuesday, That is a Thursday. And that is my report. And again, I apologize for not having a visual for you, but I will send this out to the council.
Madam Executive Director, I have a question.
Councilman Jefferson, just 1 second, because I saw Councilwoman Gordon's hand up, and then I'll get right to you.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Councilman, I have to hop off at 10:30, so thank you. So I am just a little confused about the dates that are changing and kind of flying at us, because I'm unavailable on the 22nd. I have my Tuesdays that are blocked off for this because I have other regularly scheduled meetings. So is there a way that before we schedule, like we change the schedule, we actually have a quick conversation amongst the council members? I am like totally not available for those 2 dates, and I kind of take this job seriously, and I would like to be here and be present. I don't know if those are set in stone, or if we can actually have a discussion about the reschedule of the meetings.
So, so these meetings were scheduled in January. And so the September meeting, everything has to go to the Secretary of State's office. I personally did not schedule these meetings. We do have them the first Tuesday of every month, but in September, because of the holiday, it was scheduled for today as opposed to yesterday. And that was to give time for coming back from a holiday to make sure we had everything set and in order for a council meeting. And in October, I have to tell you that I'm not quite sure why it's on a Thursday, but I did not set the schedule. When it went to the Secretary of State, I was unaware that these 2 dates, and these are the only 2 dates. The December meeting will be back on the Tuesday. So if you guys,
on a September 22nd meeting.
the September 22nd meeting are the meetings that we have that are special meetings to accommodate voting on applications. So that's a special meeting. It's not the September meeting. It's a meeting in addition. And the council decided it was going to have additional meetings when we started voting on the application, so that the folks who are applying did not have to wait a whole month for the council to vote on their application.
I'm done.
Councilman Jefferson.
Just a follow-up to Councilwoman Gordon's question, which I think was a point, which I thought was a good one. I just want to get some dates correct here. I have down for the September governance meeting on Wednesday, the 28th from 1 to 2. Are you telling me it's the 26th, or did I hear you wrong?
The date that I have so the governance committee decided that they would meet on a quarterly basis, and the next meeting, and we didn't take out any of the dates, so it would be the 26th.
Just to correct that, I don't think we decided we would meet quarterly. I think we decided that we would, if we didn't need to meet, we would cancel based on what happened. I think setting a quarterly schedule was challenging because we wouldn't know if we would need to meet or not.
That's what I recall.
So
yeah. So I'm asking, is it on the 26th falls on a Monday?
I have it on the 28th, Councilman Jefferson.
All right, that's what I have. Okay, that's number one. And the 22nd, what time is that? September 22nd, we have a special meeting. What time?
10 a.m. And I did send invites and information in the Outlook calendar. If you guys would like, if that's not a good date, that's fine. We can change it to another date that better fits your schedules. But we did decide there would be 2 meetings a month.
I don't have
the
a
social
invite for that one. I'm sorry, speaking on the line.
No, and the Social Equity Council monthly meeting for October is October 6th.
Correct.
Did I hear that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Councilwoman Name, did you have additional?
Yeah, I have not seen an invite for the special meeting for September. I'm not sure if other council members have it. I do have the October date, but I don't have a special meeting on the calendar for the 22nd. So
Nor do I.
that would need to get sent out. And I think just going back to Councilman Gordon's point, while we recognize that we need to meet more frequently for special meetings because we have licenses to approve, I think figuring out either some level of consistency and significant heads up so that we can make sure we have that on our calendars or are available. I recognize and agree that it's important that we're all able to make it, especially as we're approving and denying licenses.
Thank you, Councilwoman Name. And Director Clay, I'm going to suggest that prior to scheduling these special meetings, that you identify at least two potential dates to ensure that council members are available on one or more of those dates, so that at least we can ensure a quorum. We can't just pick a date and put it out there without confirming availability.
And they are still tentative, so I will circle back with all council members.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. So I will circle back. This is a tentative date, and I was sure that we sent out to find out if we had a quorum for this date, but I will circle back with all council members, and if this date does not work, I will come up with another date.
Any additional questions or comments? All right, thank you. We now move on to our committee reports. We'll begin with-
So, excuse me, Chairwoman, I just wanted to ask the council if it would act on the creation of the ad hoc committee to finalize the low interest loan program.
So, Director Clay, and I'm going to ask Councilman Gaddis, because I know he knows parliamentary procedure really well. Because that motion is not on the agenda, I am not. Can we still vote on that?
Madam Chairwoman, if there's no objections from any council member, you could vote on it. If any council member objects to it being added on, you cannot vote on it.
Thank you. Any objection to the addition? Councilwoman Shaw.
Can you just restate what the addition is? Sorry, just want to be clear.
Director Clay, can you state the requested motion?
Yes, requesting that the council approve the creation of an ad hoc committee to finalize the low interest loan program.
No objection to that. Thank you.
May I have a second for the motion?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, motion passes. Thank you. Now move on to our committee reports, and we'll start with the Finance Committee. Chairwoman Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning once again, everyone. The Finance Committee, as folks know, has oversight over the SEC staff budget, as well as the administration of the various programs that the council administers. And our chief responsibility is to make sure that the resources necessary to fulfill those objectives are in place, whether they be allocated bond funds or general fund appropriations or otherwise the revenues that are related to the cannabis framework in Connecticut. Last month, I reported that unspent funds for fiscal year 2022 would roll over to this current fiscal year, which we are now in fiscal year 2023, and that those funds would be available for expenditure. I've since learned that those unspent general fund dollars have lapsed back to the general fund and will not roll over. But all is not lost, but I just wanted to correct the record because there is a technical difference. Those general funds have lapsed, but there are other revenues associated with and that have been earmarked for the work of the SEC that are coming into various accounts. And so I will be in a position once I meet with the Finance Committee on September 16th, we'll be in a better position to convey exactly the revenues that are available for the current year's work. But I did want to make the council aware of that development. The executive director is working with the budget team at OPM and DECD to confirm the amounts available, and we'll be reviewing the current year's budget at that next meeting in September. And as Director Clay also mentioned, she has put out an invitation to all of the committee chairs for input on the proposed budget for the 24-25 biennium. And so that is something that the Finance Committee will likewise undertake and review at its meeting on the 16th. And that will be coming to the full council at its meeting in October. That concludes my update to the council.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman Shaw. Any questions? All
I have a
righty.
question.
Yes, Councilman Jefferson.
Councilwoman Shaw, does that adversely impact the council in any way, the fact that these funds are not rolling over?
I don't believe that the council or its work is adversely impacted. But what I do want to be in a better position to convey is the pace of the revenues that are coming in from licensing. Now we have to make sure that there's not a timing problem. Just by way of background, when the recreational cannabis framework was established, for the first year, OPM and the OPM secretary had discretion over a pool of funds that were set aside for setting up the work of the council. There were also appropriations allocated to various state agencies for different aspects of or cannabis related work. And you may recall that I think there were expenses allocated to some 6 or 7 different state agencies. That was always intended to be a preliminary allocation with the idea that revenues associated with licensing would support the work of the council. And so we should be fine, but I want to confirm that. And grateful to the OPM and DECD team as we get to the bottom of it. But it really is a transition to a self-supporting state that I think was always intended by the statute. But the notion that the funds would lapse back to the general fund was a matter that had to be corrected.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Councilwoman Shaw. Chairwoman Shaw. Next is the Governance Committee. Chairwoman name.
Excuse me, we did not have a governance committee meeting since the last council meeting, so no updates from my end.
Thank you. Moving on to the Outreach Committee. Chairwoman Alvario.
Hi, everyone. Well, I guess Ginny, Director Clay presented our report. And the only thing I want to add is that we were supposed to receive a draft of the template for the new newsletter, but we haven't received that. So I had hoped to have it by today, but I apparently did not receive it yet. So she already submitted our report. That's it.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Any questions? Okay. Next up is the Policy Committee. Chairman Shirley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Policy Committee met on the 18th, and we met to discuss potential recommendations to present to the legislature and the mechanism by which we would collect those recommendations. We also discussed the need for a framework or process by which to pose and collect community reinvestment ideas. And both of these topics we will continue to discuss at our next Policy Committee meeting. And finally, we discussed the loan program, which you've already heard about. Director Clay suggested the formation of an ad hoc committee overseen by to oversee the program with which the committee was in general agreement. The policy committee was in general agreement with that. You've already voted on that. And as you've heard, that committee would be comprised of members of the Social Equity Council and members of the Department of Economic and Community Development. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chairman Shirley. Any questions? All righty. Oh, yes, Councilwoman Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Shirley, for that report. I know that council members were asked for their feedback on the legislative changes or recommendations that would be coming forth from the council. What is the status of those collective recommendations, and is there a deadline by which we must submit our recommended changes to the enabling legislation?
Thanks for that. We, at the time, we had envisioned that we would get the answer to those questions at our retreat. As you know, we haven't had the retreat, so I will better be able to answer that after our next policy committee meeting, which is I think on the 15th. But at that point, so it would be prior to, after the 15th, and of course, prior to October 1st.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay. At this point, I'm going to, I'm sorry, last but not least, Workforce Committee, Chairwoman Valeries.
Thank you, Chair Comer. The Workforce Committee did not have a committee meeting this past month. However, I did meet separately with Executive Director Ginny Ray Clay and Andrea Comer and this Cohn-Resnick team to discuss the use of the workforce development rubric to assess the workforce development plans. The rubric is not intended to discount anyone's ability to get a license, but to ensure that their workforce development plans are robust and would meet the standard that the council had established through the use of the rubric. So what was discussed is that the rubric will be applied to all of the workforce plans as intended with the pointing system. If an applicant receives less than it meets expectations on any of the individual scores, they will be asked to come back with a additional response to beef up the plan in any one of those individual areas. If they meet the overall threshold of 70%, regardless of the feedback that's given, that plan would be approved. If they do not score a 70% on the plan then their application would be held up, moving to the next stage until they address the questions in the areas in which they did not score well on the rubric. So the goal is, again, not to inhibit anyone's ability to get a license, but to ensure that they are developing a robust workforce development plan that meets the expectations of the council. And to go along with this, as we had mentioned, we're going to be posting a position for a workforce development program manager. That posting is going up either this week or next week. Executive Director Clay could give us a better estimate of when that posting is going to be up on the state website. But the goal is, once we have that person in place, that they would be able to work with the applicants to enhance their workforce development plans if necessary, and can also work with the business side to ensure that we're understanding what the timeline is for their needs for workforce development. And then we'll also be able to work with our educational institutions in a robust way to develop programs that meet the needs of the workforce development for cannabis industry. We have a very clear understanding that not a single federal dollar can be spent on anything related to cannabis. So we will be carefully ensuring that the systematic approaches to workforce development that have been established more broadly with state and federal dollars, that we'll be very careful to ensure that the cannabis dollars are strictly separated from those. So we have an accounting for that. Executive Director Clay did point out that in the budget, there is $4.9 million set aside for 2022 for cannabis workforce development programming. Councilwoman Shaw, I would like to confirm that number with you and ensure that it wasn't part of the give back to the General Assembly. But based on that number and the future dollars that are coming in allocated to workforce development, I'm suggesting that we put together a request for proposals for our educational institutions and other private institutions who are looking to develop programming specific to the cannabis industry, can start to develop those programs and access these funds to do so. So I think that is something that we'll look forward to presenting to a more concrete plan to the Workforce Committee this month, with a vote and a recommendation to the larger council in our next official meeting. And that concludes my report. If anyone has any particular questions, I'm happy to answer them. Councilman Jefferson.
I have a question. Thank you for your report, Councilwoman Valerie. Through you, Madam Chair, and maybe this is not a related question. I'm wondering, I keep hearing this lapse of time and give back to the general fund. How much money are we giving back to the general fund? Do we have a record of that? And not to suggest that the money you spoke about, Councilwoman Valerie, is going back to the general fund. I mean, we don't even know that. But how much money are we giving back to the general fund? How much money are we not spending? How much money are we missing here? Madam Chair, maybe you can help me with this, because I'm sort of alarmed by it, quite frankly.
So I'm going to ask Councilwoman Shaw, because as our finance chair, she probably has more specifics. I know what I've heard, but I'd rather get concrete information.
Right. So your point is well taken, Councilman Jefferson. Let me share with you the numbers as I understand them, and they're based on the information I've received from the executive director and OPM. So for fiscal year 2022, which just ended on June 30th, we had, under other expenses, the budgeted amounts for fiscal 22 was $3.9 million. Of that, $230,000 was spent, or 6% of what had been budgeted for the fiscal year. Now, we had previously thought that those unspent funds would be rolled over to fiscal 23, and that they would be available for the workforce development, technical assistance, and the accelerator program. There are other revenues, and I've asked for confirmation. I don't have this confirmation yet, but there are other revenues that are coming in that have been earmarked for 4 separate accounts. And those are revenues associated with licenses and the like. And I understand that revenues have been coming in. I can't confirm the amounts at this point. My understanding, and this is where Executive Director Clay may want to jump in, is that those unspent funds from fiscal 22, while they may have lapsed back to the general fund, there are other revenues, cannabis related revenues, that are available to support the workforce development piece, and that there are sufficient funds to address that. That is a general statement, which I believe we need more supporting detail, because it's not just the monies that we have in hand today, but it's the anticipation of how we expect to spend those funds and the pace with which we expect revenues to come in to meet those expenditure needs. So I will be in a better position, and again, I've been meeting with, I met yesterday with the executive director to confirm this, but the objectives that have just been outlined as they relate to workforce development, I understand that there are resources in place to meet those needs.
I understand. Thank you for your response, Councilwoman Shaw. And I understand we have the money to meet the needs. My question was, how much money are we giving back? How much money is going back to the general fund that you said 6%, 230,000 was spent out of 3.9 million. How much of that? So are we saying that the unspent money rolled over, did not roll over?
To the extent that any unspent general fund resources, and by the way, for fiscal 22, 1.5 million was appropriated, and for fiscal 23, roughly 1.6 million was appropriated. Anything that was a general fund appropriation reverted back or lapsed back to the general fund.
May I make a comment, please?
Sure.
Just as a clarifying question that might help with this conversation, and I'm not 100% sure that this is accurate, but it was my understanding of the role of the general fund, and maybe we can get some clarification on this. Is I was under the understanding that the general fund dollars were going to be provided up front so that the council, the Social Equity Council, can run, but that they were going to be paid back by the funds coming through the licensures. And so I don't perceive that those funds going back into the general funds are funds that were lost, so to speak, that we could have spent, but that they were unneeded upfront dollars that were returned back to the general fund sooner than maybe had it been anticipated with the licensing coming through. So that could be a clarification that would help us all understand whether or not we actually had funds to spend that we didn't, and we lost the ability to spend those funds, or that was just the upfront kind of a down payment loan, so to speak, until the licensing dollars came in.
Yeah, and my understanding is similar to yours, just a little bit different. That there was always intended to be a pot of general fund dollars available for the startup costs, with the intention that the work of the council would be self-sustaining with the revenues associated with cannabis. And the only difference, and which we need to verify, Ms. Valeris, is I don't think we have to pay back the general fund kind of startup costs, but we certainly do. It was always intended that we would transition away from that general fund support. Folks may recall that when Secretary McCaw served on the council, that there were funds available, discretionary funds of up to $5 million for startup costs. And so, Mr. Jefferson, I hear your questions, and will assure you that we'll endeavor to get the kind of specificity that you deserve, because we likewise seek it. But what we really are trying to get at is the timing of the inflows and outflows, because as I said, we want to make sure that the work of the council is not interrupted, because to the extent that there are bond funds, there's a process that has to go through the bond commission process. And so that involves specific requests, and you have to, there's a process by which we have to ensure that we are on top of the timing of the expenditure. So more to come. But at this point, it was a little bit of a surprise that it happened as quickly as it did. But certainly it was envisioned as part of the transition to a self-sustaining model.
Councilman Gaddis?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. On May 2nd, I sent an email to someone, and I let them know that on House Bill 5506, page 161 to 163, specifically lines 3045 to 3123, it was a whole section about stripping SEC monies away and sweep them into the budget. And I sent this email to an individual and said, you guys got to look at this. This isn't good. And at the time, I was just bogged down with my Senate Republican work. And, I couldn't die on that hill that day. But all those monies will be swept because it's a lapse in account. And as a general rule, as a budgetary procedure, most accounts set up like our accounts are swept. That's just it's a very fiscal responsible thing to do. If you don't use the money, we're going to take the money. That's just the way it works. So prior to May, it wasn't set up like that, and someone snuck that language into the budget bill. I saw it, I raised the flag, and here we are. Madam Chairwoman, thank you for the indulgence.
Sure, thank you, Councilman Gaddis. And I also raised that issue with OPM that the money was going to be sort of reallocated, if you will, or swept as you've described it. So there is an awareness, but to Councilwoman Shaw's point, I look forward to gaining clarity on exactly what we're working with and ensuring that the work of this council is not disrupted based on the cadence of the dollars coming in. Anything else? Alrighty, at this point, I'm going to ask for a motion for us to go into executive session to discuss pending litigation and personnel matters.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
If
Aye.
you will check your inbox, you will be receiving an invite to a Teams meeting for this reason, so we can leave this meeting and then return to it